All right, today we're digging into a problem I think we've all seen up close. Why do really smart organizations, the ones filled with brilliant people, still fail to adapt? We're talking about institutional learning.
I mean, think about it. You've been there, right? In a company, maybe a government agency, even just a volunteer group, and you're just watching the same mistake happen over and over and over again. It's this weird puzzle. Why don't they just learn? And look, this isn't just a gut feeling. These are real observable patterns. The source material points out some classic symptoms. You get these mountains of data and evidence, but nobody actually changes their mind. You have the same lessons learned review meeting every single year, but nothing structurally changes. The failures don't just happen again. Somehow, they happen with even more confidence the next time around. And of course, anyone who dares to point this out usually gets quietly pushed to the side.
So what's our typical response? Well, we just throw more process at it, don't we? We commission another report, we bring in the auditors, we create these huge lessons learned binders that just sit on a shelf and collect dust. We just assume the problem is a lack of information.
But here's where this analysis gets really interesting. The paper argues that blaming bad bosses or a so-called toxic culture is actually missing the point. Yet those things definitely don't help, but they aren't the root cause of this specific problem.
The real problem is structural. It's an architectural failure. What that means is the very design of the institution, its rules, its processes, its entire setup is what's stopping it from learning. The system itself is the problem.
And that leads us to this incredibly powerful claim from the analysis. Most institutions do not fail to learn accidentally. They learn to avoid learning. Whoa. So this isn't some accident or an oversight. It's actually a skill the organization has developed. But why? Why would any organization do that?
Well, the reason they learn to avoid learning is because in most organizations, real, genuine learning feels profoundly unsafe. The paper breaks this down into 4 core fragilities that explain why.
First up, we've got legitimacy fragility. This is when learning the truth would totally torpedo the organization's reputation. So picture a government agency having to admit that its flagship policy was a complete and utter failure. The public trust, the political fallout, it would be massive. It's just safer to pretend everything's going according to plan.
Next is authority fragility. This is all about power and the chain of command. Let's say learning reveals that a senior executive's pet project is tanking. Well, that doesn't just call the project into question, it questions the exec's judgment, their decision-making, maybe even their right to be in charge. So, to protect the hierarchy, that lesson gets buried.
Then you've got capital fragility. No surprise here, this one's all about the money. If you find out that a product line you've already sunk millions of dollars into is fundamentally flawed, that knowledge is a direct threat to budgets, to jobs, and to that initial investment. So, in the short term, it often feels financially safer to just ignore the new data and keep going. And finally, there's narrative fragility. Now this one's a bit more subtle, but it is so powerful. It's about the story the organization tells about itself. You know, its identity. If a tech company's whole identity is, we are the most innovative, but learning reveals they're actually falling way behind, that truth is a dagger to the heart of their entire self-concept. So, when you take the act of learning and you tie it directly, or couple it, as the paper says, to any of these 4 threats, you've just created what the author calls an anti-learning regime. And what's so fascinating about an anti-learning regime is that it's not a place with no information. It's the opposite. It's a place that is drowning in it. You've got all the reports, all the dashboards, all the reviews, a literal mountain of evidence. But none of it leads to any real change in beliefs or rules. The information is just used to justify past decisions or to assign blame, not to actually learn anything. Okay, so if that's the trap, how in the world do you get out? Well, the paper proposes an escape plan. And it's not about finding a new hero CEO or just changing the culture. It's about building a whole new architecture for learning.
The solution is this very deliberate 2-step process. And the source is crystal clear on this. The order is absolutely non-negotiable. You cannot skip step 1 and go to step 2. Step 1 is to make it safe. This means you have to structurally, intentionally break the link. You have to decouple learning from those 4 fragilities we just talked about. You have to create an environment where discovering a flaw isn't a threat to someone's job or reputation or budget. And only after it's safe can you move on to step 2, make it accurate. This is where you make sure your new updated beliefs actually match reality.
Okay, so that's the theory. Make it safe, then make it accurate. Sound good, but what does that actually look like in the real world?
How does it actually change the way an organization operates?
Well, this chart just lays out the difference brilliantly. Over in the anti-learning regime, change only happens after a total disaster. Any evidence is just used to justify what you already did. Reforms are political and they get undone as soon as the pressure is off. And worst of all, it makes everyone more confident, but not any smarter. But with a regenerative learning architecture, you get steady, cumulative improvement. You focus on the future and you get durable, compounding intelligence.
Let's make this super concrete with an example from the paper. Imagine a public policy agency that is just constantly blowing its budget on projects. I think we can all imagine that. It's a classic, real-world problem. So using this framework, we can diagnose what's going on. The main problem here, the dominant fragility, is legitimacy. If they admit their cost estimates were wrong from the start, it'll cause a huge political scandal. And the symptom is exactly what you'd expect. Tons of official inquiries, lots of hand-wringing, but the core rules for procurement, they never change. So what's the fix? You create a protected update space. Maybe it's an independent technical unit that has the authority to revise cost standards without anyone getting fired or blamed. And the result? The rules start to actually reflect reality, not just political wishful thinking.
This example really highlights a few key design principles that you can apply anywhere. You have to create these protected spaces for honest talks. You have to formally separate the act of learning from the act of blaming. The timing of your updates, your learning cadence, it needs to match the real world, not the annual budget cycle. And this is a big one. Whatever you learn has to actually rewrite the rules of the institution, not just end up in a report that nobody ever reads again.
Which brings us to the most crucial point of all. Learning isn't a soft skill. It's not a behavior. It's not something you can fix with a few motivational posters about having a growth mindset. According to this framework, learning is a governance primitive. That means it's a fundamental, core piece of the institution's operating system, just as important as how it handles money or who has authority.
And that brings us full circle, right back to this powerful idea that sums the whole thing up. Institutions are not being irrational when they ignore the facts. They are being perfectly rational in a system that punishes the truth. They fail to learn for one simple reason, because, in their world, learning is profoundly unsafe.
And that leaves us with one final big question to really think about. Take a look at your own workplace, the institutions you're a part of. Are there structures, their real, underlying architectures? Are they designed to defend past decisions and protect the status quo? Or are they truly designed to learn their way into a complex and ever-changing future?